Bam, bam, bam. Hello, welcome to the Wargamer. I'm your host, Rob. Welcome to Stream Street Day 146. It's a lovely, balmy, sunny day here in Nottingham, and I'm very excited to talk to all of you today on this lovely Monday. I hope you're well, wherever your Monday is, wherever it be. I know it's hot down in London, but I hope it's good, whatever that might be. I want to say a big shout out to everyone on the Twitch chat who's joined us. Trog, love you. Wargaming Dad, big love. T-Man Cash, Tough Years, Draconda, Ziggy, MJ Pegasus, Grinaldi, all of you guys. Thanks for being here. Gitley, I know it's hot where you are. I want to say a big shout out to everyone else on Patreon, especially my brand new subscriber. One moment. Let me just remember this, because that's important for me to remember. Oh, bollocks. Bollocks. I wrote it down as well. I wrote it down. I'm doing it. I don't give a shit. You're all just taking it right now. I'm just going to wait for me to just do better at my job. Joshua. Thanks, Joshua. Big love to you. Oh, my God, I'm terrible. And thank you to everyone who listens to the podcast. Stay hydrated. Thanks for them Podbean iTunes reviews. Big love. Well, Dexamon is laying on the beach listening to my favourite guy, Rob. Oh, I love you. Chris is one of my favourite guys. W. Soren, hello from Texas. How cool was it talking to Matt yesterday from Texas? He's a great guy. Very lucky to have him on the show. So today's show, I am going to be looking at some lists. I haven't done this in a while. So there was several events that occurred this weekend all around the world. Some small one-dayers and some a slightly larger two-dayer. Now, obviously, we're not doing the stat show. Me and LLV aren't doing the stat show because LLV is super busy. Like, COVID has hit his industry and what he's doing really hard. But also, there aren't really enough stats or data points for tournaments for us to really effectively say anything constructive. So we're not doing that right now. But there was enough events this weekend and enough results, even one-dayers. We never used to even look at one-dayers because they're just like, whatever, it's a one-dayer. But at the minute, like a thirsty man dying for water, I'll even look at a set of one-day results, I guess. If nothing else, because I think it shows some interesting stuff. Obviously, hey K-Dread, big love to you. Obviously it gives us some sort of look at like the gaming world and where some of the tournaments might be and what some of the lists that we might face in 2020 are. So I am going to look at some of these. We obviously have done a lot of this already, looking at the Tabletop Simulator meta. I don't think that the Tabletop Simulator meta is any different by any stretch of the imagination. I think that they're just as valid as each other. So I do think that when we see those results, they are just as valid as these ones that we're looking at. However, today I just thought I'd go through these ones and see what you all thought, if that is okay with you. But my first question is, how is everyone in the Twitch chat? Stuart Hastings played on the one day in Essex, more tribes this weekend. Big love, Stuart. That would be the AOS Hangout. I think that's that event that was this weekend. Haystyle Ernest, big love to you. I'm quite proud. Saturday played a game with my Beast of Chaos, says Draconda, and got a draw against Seraphon Croak Army. Congratulations! It helped my friend couldn't roll those command point rolls on the first turn. That is important. Hello to Owen Jackson. Everyone still just shoots at each other. Yeah, it's true. Tabletop Simulator or real life, you're still shooting. So the events I'm going to talk about today are... so there's a 2-day event which was based in New Zealand, called Call to Arms. We'll talk about that in a moment. Then there were 3, maybe even 4 one-day events. I don't think I got them all. There was the AOS Hangout, which happened in Essex in the UK. There was Onslaught, which happened in Scotland. There was also the Armed Forces Day tournament over in Illinois. Now, so of the one-dayers, there's some really interesting stuff. Orthoba Studio, thanks for raiding us, baby. Thanks for raving us. Dexamon says, I've quit AOS. I only play Seraphon and KO, and no one wants to play with me. So I bought Thousand Suns and joined a 40k escalation campaign instead. Love 40k now, so it's so much fun. Oh, Dexamon, I'm glad you're finding something to play that you enjoy. That's a big one. Thanks for the raid, everyone. I wouldn't raid us, though. We're the scariest group of people. No one wants to mess with the Honest Wargamer crew. But it's nice having you here. Anyway, so of the one-dayers, let's talk about these. I'm going to talk about them top level, and then we'll break it down a little bit. So of the one-dayers, the AOS Hangout, Eric Hoger ran a Seraphon list, which we're going to look at in more detail in a bit. Then Ben Swainson, he ran a Stormcast list, which I haven't had time to deep dive into. I've spent like a couple of hours this morning looking at these lists, but I would like to at some point. It's quite an interesting one. And then, Paul Berridge has run a Kharadron Overlord Ziflin list, but the Ziflin list doesn't have the spell in the bottle, which is different to the other two, that's right, two Kharadron Overlord Ziflin lists that went that podiumed at these one-dayers. So if we move on to Onslaught in Scotland, Nathan Watson won it with Legion of Chaos Ascendant. He took that way. We'll look at that list in a moment. Phil McGuinness, he had a Kharadron Overlords list, which was again Barrack Ziflin, but did have a spell in the bottle. And then Andy Curry, third place, he took Hermdar with loads of Hearthguard Berserkers. So Andy Curry, big love to you. But there's not really much to talk about with that list. If you guys aren't aware, it's a bunch of Hearthguard Berserkers. They can it's not that it writes itself, but that's what's going on. That's pretty much what you'd end up running in the Fireslayers lists that do well. Or how's this? The Fireslayers lists that do well tend to generally be floating around there. So interestingly, so that's the Scottish event, and again we'll come back to the Legion of Chaos Ascendant list, and then the Armed Forces Day, which is over in Illinois. Jonathan Anderson took it out with Dom Hain, Idnet Deepkin, so it was just loads of eels. Again, we're not going to look at that list. We don't really need to look at it. We know how it works. Congratulations to Jonathan. It's a great, it's always been a good list. In second place, Joe Benson with Big War. He had quite a few Ard boys. I think he had 15 2-5s. He had a big block of 30 not Ard boys, Savage boys. What are they called? They're not called More boys. They're called Savage Uruk boys, lads, dudes, chaps. Anyway, the naked fellas. Those guys. Anyway, but he had those in the Ard Fist. Is that right? No, sorry, the Iron Fist. The Iron Fist, which allows him to use the Mighty Destroyer's ability once per turn for free. So make them, move up or fight in the combat phase. But it was a Big War also. So it wasn't an Iron Jaws army. It was Big War. Big War, and we've seen that work really, really well. Interestingly, we saw that work. We've been seeing Big War do work ever since October last year, where we saw Eric Hoger do it at the Justice Series event. We saw the wonderful Leo Ratunen running it. Obviously, he was running Pure Iron Jaws. Actually, it was Eric, who we're going to be talking about in a bit, who was running that originally. There was no Daughters of Cain lists in these. There were lists at some of these events, but I've kind of looked at the top three or the performers, and then I'm picking out, instead of looking at every list, I'm going to pick out the list that I liked and the combination that I liked in there and how it worked, right? If that's okay with everyone. Proposition Joe, I went 0-3 at one day at the weekend with my Big War. I'm determined to get points reduction for War Clans in December. Good work, Prop Joe. Proud of you. Fireslayers and Hearthguard are like two peas in a pod. It was basically the list I took to Sheffield Slaughter back then. Oh, Josh Lemon, are you in the chat? Is this your list? Where is this? Why can't I find my Fireslayers list? Andy Curry. No, different guy. But yeah, that's just what they work. How many players at the events? So the events were low. Like one day they were like 20 people, so not many. They're not many. And again, normally I wouldn't look at numbers so low or results so low. But Eric's a competent gamer, for example. And when we go and look at the 2-day in New Zealand, you got some big names who are really competent. That's not to say that some of the other guys that we're seeing here, like Paul Berridge, aren't players of note that I know of at least. And obviously in Scotland, Nathan Watson, Phil McGuinness, and Andy Curry are all competent players. And then I don't really know much about the Illinois Warhammer meta, but I would like to know more. So I don't know if Jonathan or Joe Benson, who came in second with his Big War, are solid players, but I'm sure they are. However, in third place, Josh Lopez, again, KO, Barrack Ziflin, spell in a bowl. That's what he had. Hey War Machine, hope you're well. Mine was 3 units of Hearthguard and a bunch of heroes. It was my first ever major event I've ever been to. It was great fun. Well, good, Josh Lemon. You should go to events when we can and safely because they're good. So out of 3 tournaments, the podium's either shoot or anti-shoot or tank. Yes, Owen, but don't let it make you sad because I actually think that I saw a conversation that was happening earlier, and I think there's a really good conversation that we can have here. Really, really good conversation. First off, let's talk about it. Seraphon are S tier. Anyone who says that they're not is an idiot. We'll just start there. There you go. You can start off with that bit of internet drama for the day. There is an OBR list. Hold on, I'm not finished. Where were we at? Okay, I've done that. Onslaught, Chaos Ascendant. Yes, so in... Oh, where's my... Oh, yes. So at the two-dayer, Carriage and Overlords took it out with the wonderful AOS Tubbs, Sean Dubman. He's coming on the show a week on Saturday to talk about KO. So we'll be talking about that then. And then in second place was OCR Bone Reapers with Staliarch Lords, but with Nagash. So run and charge Nagash. I think you had a 15 of Death Riders, a 10 and a 5. And then there might have been a Liege Cavalos as well. Can I find the list? No, I can't. I'll come back to that. But there was a big one. Also, the naming convention of that list, which was run by Mitch Harty, was hilarious. I'm just gonna say that. Okay. Right. So you can strongly disagree all you like. I just do this for a living. Right. So next up. Third place, Ziflin. Okay. So let's talk about what's interesting about the KO lists first off. That'll be the first port of call, because I think that there's a really interesting story. If you look at what's happened over the past 6 months with the release of, well, not even more than 6 months, but if you look at some of the very heavy shooting that we've seen produced in both Carriage and Overlords, Zinch with the Flamer Spam, for example, or not even Flamer Spam, you could just have it with a bunch of pink horrors, but being able to do all those shots at Rend 1 is another form of shooting. Then we had KO that we will have Lumineth at some point coming in. So we've got some very competent shooting, which is interesting because previous to this, we also had Cities of Sigmar and the shooting that we saw from like Hallowheart builds where they were just dumping a bunch of shooting. So you've got this kind of like, and now since GHB, you have some massive points reductions on dwarves, dispossessed dwarves in cities, so you're going to see more shooting. You've had big points reductions on Stormcast, and there are 2 Stormcast lists in the top 3 of 2 of these events. So the first one is, and you'll be able to, first one is AOS, is Big Sean, over from New Zealand. So AOS Sean, if you know him, but you can't miss Big Sean if you've ever met him. He's a fucking legend. And then you've got Ben Swainson, who did it with an Anvil's list, which was Soulstrike though, but that was very, very different to Sean's list. But both of those 2 shooting lists didn't win the event, but they did come high. So there's an interesting story there. But we're going to look at some of those lists in detail. But this is really important. To continue on the story. There's lots and lots of shooting now, whether it be from units that have had points updates in the GHB or just from battle tomes that have been released in the past 6 months. So the game is very shooting heavy, which is interesting because we didn't really tech into shooting heavy before. Where I think there's an interesting conversation is when we'll finish looking at Eric's list, because Eric's list, which is a Seraphon list, and I know Seraphon could just do everything, right? So they've got the width and depth as a book to just be like, okay, I don't want to take part of the shooting game, I'm just going to tank it. So we're going to talk about that in a moment. But it's an interesting counterplay predicting the shooting, I think. So there's some really, really fun stuff here. Okay, well, if you don't think I'm good at something, then don't fucking listen. It's really simple. So, next up. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it and look at the lists, right? We will start with... I've written all my lists now. What are we going to start with? Let's start with... because we're finishing with Eric's list. Okay, then we'll start with Josh Lopez's list, and we'll look at the similarities of the one-day list, right? Okay, so you've got Barrack Ziflin, and he's got Spell in the Bottle, like I said. So he's got Iron Sky Attack Squadron. He's got 2 frigates. He had 2 frigates in the list, which the arcs come in the Iron Sky Attack Squadron, and they're able to disembark after they move. Now, a lot of, especially me on the show, we've been talking a lot about the frigates and the boats and their ability to kind of like lift up, drop down outside 9, shoot, and just keep repeating that process. Yeah, in this situation, it's quite fun because he's going to be able to run or move forward with these, drop out his Archanaut companies, but he doesn't have lots of them. Yeah, and then dump some guys onto objectives. So I can't post links to some of these things. Because they're all in different places. Some of them are on Tabletop TO. What I will do before tonight's show is I'll collate them all in some sort of document with links, and I'll include them in the show notes if that's okay with everyone. I tried to put it all together, but it's taken quite a while. So I am where I'm at. Disembark after move doesn't work with Fly High. No, it doesn't. But the interesting thing about Iron Sky Attack Squadron here, as I'm talking about, is that it's doing a different role. So instead of flying high, dropping down, shooting, what's happening is the boats are actually having to move. I know, bold new world where units are moving across the board, and then they're disembarking their Arcanauts to take objectives. So that's what's going on there. And then the Iron Sky Command, which is another battalion that you see in here, makes it so that KO units are immune to battle shot within range. So there's quite a lot of points spent in boats in Josh's list. So you've got the Ironclad, and then you've got the 2 frigates. So nearly 1,000 points. Anyway, so that's Josh's list. And then the Paul's list was quite different again. We'll come back to that, but let's actually look at the KO list. The KO list that took out that went 5-0 at an event, which is Sean's list, and this was really different in this situation, right? Really, really different. So because he didn't take Ziflin, he took Barrack Mornar. So very, very different. Okay, so Barrack Mornar allows you to have first turn, allows your whole army to run and shoot. And this is big, right? Big news. Because instead of, again, like looking at the fly high being an option to do this, I think generally is avoiding that. He's avoiding that. And what he's doing is he's running across the board on the first turn. And he's got a lot of bodies, a lot more bodies than some of the other lists had. Also, because one of the lesser traits is you can always strikes first on a unit once per battle. So he had a unit of 9 engine riggers. So he had an ironclad, 9 engine riggers. So that unit of 9 engine riggers not only can run and shoot, it can then charge, and it can always strikes first. So like it can strike before anyone else. Now that's only 1 unit once per battle, but that's obviously the unit that's going to get it done, which is pretty scary. They attack each, hit on 2s, win on 3s, rend 2, D3 damage. That's a lot of attacks. That you can do into close combat, and I'm a big fan of that. I really do like that, and I thought it was good because it's very different to Ziflin, where like the Ziflin choice, you can see where like the Ziflin lists all did well. Some of them went 3-0, some of them went like 2-1, but it's only this list that went 5-0. So so there were 3 special weapons on. Hold on, let me just very quickly again remind myself exactly of the list. Okay, so it was 2 navigators. Can't wait to talk about the navigators in a minute. An Aether Chemist, and then he had 2 lots of 20 Arcanauts, 10 Arcanauts, 9 Engine Riggers, 10 Thunderers, and a Gunstock Gun Hauler. And the 10 Thunderers went inside the Gun Hauler. And then an Arcanaut Ironclad, and then the Iron Sky Command. So that's the situation. Iron Sky Command, again, all of those Arcanauts, as long as they're within 18 of the Ironclad, are immune to battle shock. So that was the situation. And don't forget, they've also got the ability to use all their Aether Gold, so they can use reroll hits, they could use reroll saves. So being in Barrack Mornar has allowed him so he can also run. So he's got those Arcanauts, and they can all run forward and still shoot. The Engine Riggers have got 3 drill launchers also, FYI. 10 Thunderers. Anyway, so then he's got the So that's the list. That's the list. Now let me talk about everything else. Now the KO are immune to battle shock within 18 inches. Okay, and then let's talk about the artifacts. So the and what the units do. So the navigators. So the two navigators that we have in this situation. The navigators have got a really cool ability. So they pick a unit, and if it can fly, they roll a dice. And on a 2 to 5, they can half its move. And he's got 2 of those. Now let's look at some of the prevailing threats, like let's say eels, other boats, for instance, being able to make Seraphon units fly high. Flamers also fly. Little interesting side note. So there's a lot of like flying units which generally being able to half their move would be quite useful, and it's a bonkers range. It's like 36 inches. So he's got that twice, which is really, really sweet. But he's also got, did he have the Gale Force Stave, which is another artifact that he has. As one of his artifacts, which is just brilliant, because the Gale Force Stave is you basically, if you pick a unit within 12 inches during their charge phase, and they half their charge range, which is a shooting army exactly wants that. It's like what the Khorne Demon Prince can do, in that it can, but the Khorne Demon Prince can shut down everyone's charging. So the Khorne Demon Prince is better, but it's in Khorne, so it's worse. More on that in another show. But it might not be. But in this situation, it's quite useful. It's only one unit. But when you do have these big brick hammer units, looking at the Fire Slayers guys, if they're within 12, so you can't declare a charge if you're outside of 12, if you set it up right. So, if halving their charge range within 12 does make it very, very unlikely that they're actually going to get that charge all the way through. Which is good. I really, really like that. I think that's and I can see that being used really, really well inside the Ironclad. So you just make it so you just pop it there, and you can't charge me, right? So a really cool artifact. I really, really like that. And then the Gun Hauler has got a special engine work, which gives it some additional mortal wounds on the charge. So the Gun Hauler can go in and do some mortal wounds, which again is a really nice. We talked about this right at the beginning of the stream streak. Any charges you can do, any mortal wounds you can do on the charge, or any damage you can do on the charge is really useful, specifically into monsters. Because if you can bracket a monster before you ever have to engage with it, that's super useful. You obviously want to shoot everything and never actually fight, but being able to go in, charge, do the mortal wounds, I think is really solid. Really, really solid. And then the Ironclad, he's given the additional +2 wounds. So that's 20 wounds with the ability to heal. The Endrin Riggers can heal, so there's healing. There's 20 wounds on there. It's a great armor save. You could use a rerollable save if you really wanted to. The ability to shut down charging. So it's got loads and loads of legs. Now, Sean's going to come on the show, talk about this later. But it's also got a lot of output. It's got the 50 Arcanauts there. It's got the 3 Engine Riggers, who are just going to go wild. It's got the 10 Thunderers. It's got the Gun Hauler, and it's got the Ironclad. It's a lot of output. So it's a really cool list, and I can't wait for Sean to talk about it. But it's fascinating that of the 4 events that we've looked at, Kharadron Overlords have ended up podiuming. However, only one of them is Barak Mornar, and Barak Mornar went 5-0 in an event, which I think it's cool. It's really interesting to talk about. Whether or not shooting is a big MPE. So a negative play experience, or it seems very easy and tactile to do. I would still say that Sean is a quality player, and the New Zealand community have got some really, really solid wargamers in it. So I wouldn't look down on it if I was everyone. I would look at it and think, okay, how would I try and deal with this? I think is a really key part. So then next up is so that's the KO conversation. And obviously, I'd love to see your KO list, hear about your KO list, and see what KO stuff you're running wherever, or if you face them and how you find that experience. because I think we're going to see a lot more of them. And I think maybe they didn't need the points reductions that we saw in the GHB, but we have now got those points reductions. So we're just going to, deal with it. Now on to Stormcast. So again, looking at the notes, so Stormcast came third at the 2-day event in New Zealand, but Stormcast also came second at the AOS Hangout with from Ben Swainson. So you've ended up with 2 Stormcast lists podiuming out of 5 events, which we probably wouldn't have said that 6 months ago, and they're all of the same vein. They're shooting Stormcast. They're both anvils of Held and Hammer. This seems to be the way to go, and they're very, very outputty. I can't wait to talk to you about Sean. Again, other Sean, so this is different Sean. Big Sean is going to come on the show and talk to you about his Stormcast list at some point. Yeah, Stormcast Eternals winning. Well, not winning, doing well. They're not winning, but they 4-1. I think Sean went, and I think Ben Swainson went 3-0. I'm going to go for. So I'm going to read out Ben's list, but I haven't had time to deep dive it, so I will be doing that at another point. So he's Anvils of Held and Hammer. He's got a Lord of Quilla. He's got a Knight of Xeris and a Lord of Relictor, and then he's got 2 lots of Vanguard Hunters and some Liberators. That's right. He's got 9 Castigators. 3 Castigators. He's got 6 Vanguard Raptors with long strike crossbows, 6 Paladors, 3 Aetherwings, a Ballista, and he's got the Soul Strike Brotherhood. Now, again, I haven't had the time to deep dive, and this comes from the 1 day. So I'm slightly less interested, although I'm loving the idea of Castigators being in a list. So I want to come back to that at another point and have a conversation about it. So yeah, and the link is in the chat. Thank you very much. Some of these are available on Tabletop TO, some aren't. So I'll have to come back to it. However, Big Sean's list over in New Zealand, so his Stormcast list is also Anvils of Held and Hammer. Same sort of thing. So Big Sean Bates, right? However, it's very, very different. Now, it's a Lord of Quilla, a Venator, another Venator, a Knight of Xeros, and then he's got 3 lots of Vanguard Hunters. He's got 3 Vanguard Raptors with long strike crossbows. He's got 3 lots of 3 Aetherwings, 3 lots of 3 Vanguard Raptors with long strike crossbows. He's got 3 Vanguard Paladors. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. He's got the Vanguard Angelus Conclave, which is a battalion, 150 points. He's got the Vanguard Justicar Conclave, which is 120 points. And then he's got the Vanguard Auxiliary Chamber. Now, the other 2 battalions that I talked about go into the 3rd battalion. So 2 battalions into the 3rd battalion. So Angelus Conclave and Justicar Conclave into the Auxiliary Chamber. Now, the Auxiliary Chamber is the important one, because everything inside that, which is all of these things, if they can shoot, not the characters, they get to shoot twice, or they get an additional attack, basically. So they don't get to shoot twice. Sorry, I'll be specific. They get an additional attack on their shots, which is really important on those Vanguard Raptors with long strike crossbows, because they get 1 shot each, which is really good. Hits on 2, wounds on a 3, -1, does 2 damage. Let me just double check it's -1. I tried to do my research earlier. Let me just see if I put this all in my head. -2. -2 damage. However, any 6s to hit cause 2 mortal wounds. So 6s to hit cause 2 mortal wounds. And their range is 24 inches, so it's really good. However, if they don't move, they get to add 6 inches to that, so that could be 32 inches effectively. And then also the Aetherwings are able to counter-charge for them. So they've got this thing called Hunting Call. If an enemy unit finishes a charge move within an inch of a friendly unit that includes a Raptor Prime, so that's these guys, roll a dice for each model in the Raptor Prime's unit. For each 6+, the charging unit suffers 2 mortal wounds. So that's that situation. Right. Morning, Mathmallow. Big love to you. Okay, so it's a 1 drop. So he gets to drop, he gets to decide what's going on. If something deploys within 24 inches, he gets to do a lot of shooting. Or how does he do that? So the Vanguard Raptors with long strikes that we've talked about, now because they're in this, they've got 2 shots each. So that unit of 3 are doing 6 shots instead of 3 shots, hitting on 2s, wound on 3s, Ren 2, doing 2 damage, and every 6 to hit is doing 2 mortal wounds. So what you're really going to... Is it in addition? Because that would be amazing. Oh no, the attack sequence ends, so it's just flat there. However, so that means you're doing 2 mortal wounds per 1, and then you're probably doing 6 to 8 damage. It's pretty solid. Out of each block of 3. Don't forget he's got 3 of those. Now, because he's an Anvils of Heldenhammer, they've got a command ability, and that command ability allows you to shoot in the hero phase with a unit. And you could do this multiple times. So if he wanted to, he could make all 3 units shoot twice and then shoot again in the hero phase. So in this situation, he's doing 18 shots in the hero phase, and then he's doing 18 shots in the shooting phase. So he's doing 36 shots that hit on 2s, wound on 3s, Ren 2, doing 2 damage, and any 6s to hit did 2 mortal wounds. So it's just like a machine gun of shots that are just blitzing through. Yeah, it's wild. Yeah, it sounds like Jezzail's. It's like Jezzail's, only they're tankier. Now they are very fragile. Yes, they could also. Thank you, AOS Tim. They could also be rerolling ones to hit, thanks to the Azeros and a bunch of other ways, if you wanted to. Haley Bromley, big love to you. So you can reroll to hit as well. Reroll ones to hit. It's wild. It's just so much output into the midfield from those 3 units. Don't forget, they're only 170 points each. So a lot of combos. He spent 400 points of battalions to be able to achieve that. So it's a lot invested to make that happen. So when you hear about it, and really it's all sat on like 18 wounds with a 4-up save. So all his output basically is in those 18 wounds on the 4-up save. Not forgetting the Aquila and the Vanguard Paladors are okay. They can run around grabbing objectives, but it's just a lot of concentrated firepower in certain ones. That gets worse over time because as he starts to lose CP later on, it doesn't become as effective. His ability to shoot twice doesn't happen, but he can still shoot 18 shots every shooting phase, which is pretty terrifying. And I think you're going to see stuff like this happen. Well, you can see lists like this. We've talked about this a few times. This is going to be something that you might see. And it's also a pretty spammy army in that it's got, it's got 9 Aether Wings, 9 Raptors, 15 Vanguard Hunters. It's quite a cool army to build and paint if you wanted to. I wouldn't be against it. I think it looks quite nice. But yeah. But it's just going to kill your heroes, it's going to kill your monsters, it's going to kill those key units, and then it's going to just like drive through. Yeah, so pew pew. So obviously I've talked a lot about shooting through these list reviews so far, and it seems like shooting is predominantly. Do you get 3 CP if you take the Mega Battalion? So you get a CP for each battalion you take. So that would be, he starts basically the game with 4 CP. So that's how. So he'll start with 3, and then on his first turn would get an additional CP. So that's 4 CP, and he also gets the choice to go first or second. Yeah, it's really, really good. It's really strong, powerful. However, it didn't win. It didn't win. It lost to the Karajan Overlords army of Sean. And it's also got some really cool tactics as well. I can't wait to have Sean on the show. You could leave stuff, a classic Stormcast, you could just leave stuff off the board, right? It's got the ability to block charges in the Aether Wings. It's cool. It's super cool. It's really good. And it's Stormcast being cool. Like, as much as I think that they might be boring as hell, it's a fun list. You guys can see it. It's really interesting. Okay, so let's talk now about the final list that we've got here. So this is from One Day. So big shout out to Sean, by the way. I'll quickly run through the list that came in second because it is a funky list. But like with all like OC Bone Reaper lists, they're always a bit like they're limited, really. So it's an OC Bone Reapers list with Staliart Lords. It's got Liege Cavalos, who takes the artifacts that you need to take. And then it's got Nagash, and it's got 15 and 2 5s of Death Riders, and an Aether Void Pendulum, and a Bone Tithe Shrieker. So run and charge Nagash, or retreat and charge Nagash. Oh, no, not retreat and charge, just run and charge Nagash. And those Death Riders, you'll get loads of healing back from Nagash, and it's just going to throw everything forward. And I think it will pin you back as well, quite well. So I really like that. These OBR yeah, it's a cool list. It would look awesome. And also, if you were able to ever put Nagash on top of a giant horse, you could just have an entire mounted army, and it would look wicked, right? Hey Bradley, hope you're well. Big love to you. Right, next up, or not next up, but last up is Eric's list. Now, I really like this list. I really like this list, and let me tell you why in the general grand scheme of things. Because it looks like a list that knows it's going to get shot, and it's ready for it. It also shoots. Welcome to the gun show, boys. Right, so let's talk about the list. So this is Eric Hoger. So he ended up winning the one-day event down in Essex against a one-dayer, so different. So he's got a Seraphon army, and he has got a Thunder Lizard constellation, which means his whole army gets. So let's talk about some of the things that you get. You get +1 attack on the jaws. You get your whole army takes -1 damage. So this is really, really important. So -1 damage, +1 attack on the jaws. All of his monsters are going to get +2 wounds. So because they're in this list. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, +2 wounds, which is cool. And then he's also got a battalion, and the battalion is the Thunderquake Temple Host, and in that he's got the Stegodon with Skink Chief, and then he's got 2 Stegodons in there. So they've got +2 wounds as well. And the battalion allows them to run and shoot. Yeah? Yes. So run and shoot. And why is that important? Okay, well, they've got the Sky Streak bows. So let's talk about some of the elements that they're able to put in here, because they've got the Sky Streak bows, which are really good shooting attacks. Let me just get the profile up exactly. So the 3 attacks each, hitting on 3s, wound on 3s, rend 1, 3 damage. 3 damage. That's 9 shots that hit a 24-inch range, and they're on a movement 10, movement 8, but they can run and shoot. So, but that's only, like, he has spent quite a few points on that, but I don't think, weirdly, I don't think that that's actually where the strength of the list would be. Eric might be able to tell me different, but I don't think that's the real strength. I think that's just a distraction. What that does, it means you have to go and engage with Eric. Don't forget, it's not a coalesced army, right? Which means, no, sorry, it's not a starborn army, so there's no teleports. So there's no teleports in this situation, so he has to play the game properly. His whole army takes -1 damage, though, so those KO boats fly over and they do a load of shooting. Might be able to survive a bunch of it. He's also got +2 wounds on each monster, which is effectively +4 wounds, really, when you're reducing damage by 1. Not quite, it doesn't quite work out like that, but similar. So I think that, I think this is decent, anyway. So, but I think the shooting that he randomly does from the Stegodons means you have to go over and try and deal with them. And the Stegodons could charge you and beat you up, but they're not the key parts of his list. So he's got 40 Saurus Warriors as battle line, and then he has got so the 2 Stegodons are also his battle line, and then he's got 9 Pterodon Riders. He's got 4 Salamanders, and well. It's got 1 Salamander, really, but with 3 Skink Handlers. And then he's got a Pterodon Chief, a Skink Star Priest, he's got a Stegodon Chief, which we talked about before, and he's got Saurus Oldblood on Carnosaur, which is, again, cool. Okay, so the Saurus Oldblood on Carnosaur isn't the general. He's got a Fusel of Conflagration, which is like just as a shooting attack. It's not really that important. Stegodon and Skink Chief is important, though, because he's got the artifact, the Cloak of Feathers, which gives him +4 move, and it gives him -1 to hit. So that -1 to hit is really important because, again, shooting's going to come after him. He's -1 to hit. He's reducing damage by 1. You know, so and he's got +2 wounds. So he's a lot more survivable than, you know, you would want. And that's important because his command ability is going to be really useful. He's also got a Skink Star Priest who's got the spell Hand of Glory, which is reroll 1s, and that's going to be quite important when we talk about the either the Saurus Warriors or the Pterodon Riders. And then he's got the Pterodon Chief. It's a bit of a I think maybe might be an input error. He's got the command trait is the Master of Star Rituals, which means a Skink Priest, not Star Priest, unless the Skink can use a command point for free, but the Skink Star Priest doesn't have a command ability, so I'm not really sure. Well, it's not even a command point, a specific ability that's found on just the Skink Priest that's not the Star Priest, so the command trait might be wrong on this, I think. But yeah, no Croak and Slan in this build, which I think is the point, right? No Croak, no Slan, but still really scary. But it's confusing as to why it's scary, so I'm going to kind of like try and like explain it out. So we've already talked about the fact that he could be doing 9 damage at range with the shooting from the Sky Streak bows. already really scary. But it is 3s and 3s, so it probably won't be 9 damage per. It might be like just 3. But that is 9 from all 3 of them, and he can keep doing that. Pew, pew, pew. Now, the Fortisaurus Warriors, they're reducing their damage by 1, don't forget, and all of their jaw attacks have got, they've got +1 on their jaw attacks. So they've got, you know, like just some more output, so that Saurus Warrior block is a lot scarier. And the Old Blood on Carnosaur has got a command ability, which is going to be able to give them +1 to hit as well. So they're going to be a good combat block. They're not the best combat block, but they're a good combat block. They're potent in this situation. But the other elements here, which are really scary, is the Pterodon Chief and the 9 Pterodon Riders. Yes, so yeah, Grinaldi, he does. We're going to get onto this. We're going to get onto what I see here being the key part. So the Pterodon Chief has got, the Skink Chief on the Stegodon. He's got a command ability that gives you +1 attack in melee. That's really important for Skink units. The Pterodon Riders have got +1, have got the Skink keyword, because obviously they're ridden by Skinks. So you can give them +1 attack on all their melee weapons. They also get +1 attack on their melee weapons, on their jaw bite attacks, because they are obviously in coalesced. So now you've got +2 attacks on their jaw attacks, and they've got 4 attacks each. So they're going to end up with 6 attacks per one, and there are 9 of them. Like, there are 9, which is wild. So let's talk about this combo that you can do. So you can run the Pterodon Riders over with your Sunleech Borrowers and do a bunch of shooting. Yeah. You can give them reroll 1s to hit if you wanted to, but they don't need that. You could use the Pterodon Chief to activate their drop bombs ability. So you could drop 9 rocks, which means on a 2+, 9, you roll 9 dice, 2 pluses, each one is a D3 mortal wound. So you're looking at 7 or 8 D3 mortal wounds just in the movement phase. Then this 270 point unit of Pterodon Riders is going to charge in. And let me just get you the exact stats on it so you can see. So they're going to end up with, and their movement 16 as well. So they're very, very fast. So their razor sharp jaws are going to get 6 attacks each, hitting on 4s, wounding on 4s, no rend, doing 1 damage. So if you've got the big tanky unit, drop mortal wounds on them and then hit them with all this stuff, which is just going to just decimate. I mean, it's a lot of attacks, and yeah, really good. You could give them the reroll 1s to hit from Hand of Glory as well from the Skink Star Priest. But before you've sent them off, you've used the Skink Star Priest ability to give them mortal wounds to hit on 6s. Mortal wounds on 6s to wound. Okay, so you're doing almost 60 attacks just from the razor sharp jaws from the Pterodon Riders. You only hit them with half of them. Maybe if you're rerolling 1s, it's a few more. Let's just pick half to make it easy. That's 30. That means you're doing 5 mortal wounds when you're using them to attack as well. So it's really, really quite good. The Starstrike Javelins, no, not the Starstrike Javelins. Ignore that. Just ignore that completely. Essentially, it's Jurassic Park. Yeah, not bad. It's not bad. But I think the important part is that it's fairly survivable. And then you've got a salamander just running around shooting things. So it's a really cool combo using the +1 attack on that melee weapon on the razor sharp jaws, giving them the mortal wounds, making them super fast. And then the interesting element about these compared to the Ripperdactyls is that they have that additional mortal wound bomb that they can do. So they run over, they drop the mortal wounds, they're like, bam, off I go. And then they charge something else and they just flood it with attacks, maybe do some additional mortal wounds. They could tie up a lot of an army as well. So you're not going to be able to like arcane bolt this unit out. So in your next shooting / combat phase, you might be pinned back by this unit and you can just start shooting with the Stegodons at the back of the field. If you end up charging this army first, the Saurus Warrior block can tank a bunch of it. You know, they can hold up. The Stegodons can all countercharge. There's 3 of them that countercharge. Also, the Salamander hunting pack as well. Like, if that ends up going like wild, because Salamanders get an extra attack as well on their jaws, and they can do D3 mortal wounds if they 6s to hit. So you can do some really good stuff with the Salamanders. But I just really like it. It's a bunch of combinations of synergies that you're seeing here. like touching each other, and then as the army falls apart, if you lose the Skink Star Priest or the Pterodon Chief early, the army becomes much worse, and you can kind of break it apart a little bit. But it's really mobile. It's got lots of output. It's got quite a lot of wounds, and it's quite cool because it's got 3 Stegodons. Yeah, so I just started blasting. Yeah. Anyway, so that's everything. That's everything. It's been nice as well. It's been nice looking at some of these lists and seeing how they've been performing realistically. Whether or not it's a true reflection, I think it's very fair to say that I feel like the game is very, very shooty now, and it's going to continue to be very shooty. You're going to see that you're still going to see it from Salamanders. I played a game with them the other day. It was a joke. So that's going to be the situation. KO, you've still got Flamers out there in the world. They're still a thing. Eternal Conflagration Flamers. You've got Stormcast coming back, doing it in that shooting fashion. I think you're going to see, when eventually they get done, a bunch of Dispossessed. So you're going to see Iron Drakes. That's some more shooting that you could potentially see coming out of these armies. So there's... and then, of course, you've got Teclis, yes, and his Sentinels. And Teclis really isn't shooting. It's just mortal wound, like Oprah giving out candles. But yeah, I get... So, well, I mean, there's one magic dom in this situation. The difference between magic domination and shooting is you don't need anything to make the shooting often work. It just works. The magic doms, if they're battling it out, they have to battle it out. And what I like about Eric's list is I feel like Eric's list was a step ahead, where it's where lists will go. Now, it's not every army that's going to be able to reduce damage by 1. It's a fairly unique ability in Seraphon, but there are some armies that can take a hit and maybe keep rocking, but can you do it from 30 inches is the question. But ultimately, the thing with shooting is that the game is an objective-based game. If you look at like even Sean's list that he ran, he had a lot of bodies in his list. He had 50 Arcanauts. So, and they're good, they shoot as well, but their job is to hold objectives. And if you can hold objectives, like even the scariest Ironclad, or those 3 Vanguard Raptors, there's 3 of them. Like if you can outscore them with anything, then you can outscore them. Now that's easier said than done if all your stuff's dead. It's not really an issue. It's a whole 12 inches on my BT's whip. Yeah. All right. Anyway, you don't need a gun when you have the brass orb. That's right, Lee Bromley. Yes. That's true. Oh, we haven't even talked about, obviously at the most recent TTS event run by Owen, we saw Mark Meermouse, who I hope is coming on the show this week to discuss it with me. He saw a Skaven list do really, really well. And again, lots of shooting in that Skaven list. Storm Fiends, everything else. Now, I'm not on a pedestal complaining. I'm just kind of relaying the information to us all. You guys, I'd love to know what your thoughts are, how you feel about it. Twitch chat, this is your time to have your say. And I'd love to in the show notes below. I'm going to try every Monday to look at any tournament results coming in. If some haven't come in, like if there are no tournaments, I won't be able to do so. But I would like to, as we see tournament results come in. So if you hear of any tournaments or something you want to look at, I'm going to just, if I haven't read your list, any of the guys that came in the top 3, congratulations for doing well at your event. I'm just going to pick out the ones that either stand out to me or are fun to talk about at the end of the day. Okay. Rob, how's building going, and should we call you Bob? Says K-Dread. No building today. We're waiting for a skip. We've built too much, so the tsports arena is on the build. We're just waiting for a skip. That's what we're doing. Waiting for a skip, and then we can throw everything out. And then after that, more building to come. The tables come this weekend, which I'm very excited about. I'm curious what generic tactic builds that work better against shooting. None. Would it be deep strike from reserves, hordes, or sheer weighted numbers, pure speed? So it depends. It depends on the sort of shooting that you're talking about. Like, can you get in and kill an ironclad in a turn, or can you build an army that does so? Yes, some stuff can. Can you outdrop? Normally, outdropping and going first is the ability to go against shooting. You never want shooting to have a double turn. Problem is range. I've discussed this already. I think one of the key parts that we need to discuss as a community is what we actually do with terrain. Terrain's generally pretty sparse. Now, the question is it a problem right now? And the problem is there isn't enough events for us to really even discuss that. I don't think. I mean, we could discuss it, but not like have any quantitative information to produce a result. We could just go for best feel. I feel like it wouldn't hurt if we were to choose a couple of pieces of terrain that were really tall, or we would just say that they're obscuring effectively, like in 40k, and say that they were there. We were complaining, though, this is our own fault as a community. Last year we were complaining that Slaanesh were dominating because we had nothing to shoot them with, and then Games Workshop gave us a ton of tools to shoot everything with. But maybe they overcooked the egg, I think, in this situation, and maybe we've got a little bit too much. Things like Sentinels are a little bit horrific because they even ignore not leading line of sight, so you could just shoot what you like. But proof's going to be in the pudding when we see some big tournaments happen and we see some real games, I guess. Deepkin don't mind a shooting army. That's true. Deepkin, you could just take eels for their one-trick ability, but I would expect a Deepkin book to be out soonish, in the next 6 months to a year. So I would probably hold off on buying a bunch of eels if you wanted. And also, it's a really fun playstyle if you really enjoy that build. Like, if you enjoy it, it's fun. But everyone has always played it, or already played against it a ton of times. So it's your choice as whether or not that's what you want to play. But we can't all just play Deepkin or shooting. Overgrown, yeah, that's the one, Sebmar, thank you. Yeah, we could just decide that there'll be 2 pieces of Overgrown on every board. Maybe that'll just balance it all out, realistically. Problem is Overgrown doesn't work if you can fly. So if you can fly, you can shoot still Overgrown. And the things that you want to be shot at, or that wants to be shot at or wants to shoot, normally flies. And this time next year, the AOS will have the same terrain rules as 40k. I agree with that. I agree with that. Speaking of terrain, in certain missions, I literally couldn't deploy my OBR Nexus in the mini tourney we're playing currently. Also had issues getting the Moorpot down. A tournament with pre-placed terrain. JP, I think that we talked about this before. Me and Pete from Northern Ireland, we've talked about terrain maps being a thing for Age of Sigmar. Maybe we could produce some so that they're a little bit more standardized. And maybe something to look at would be to include some maybe overgrown terrain on the board, and just pick them out. It's a great conversation to have as a community. I'd love to know your thoughts. You can join me later in the week as we continue this discussion. I like looking at lists because they bring up all these ideas. I really like Eric's list. I really like Sean's list. I think those are super fun armies to look at. I also really, really like the Staliarch Lords Nagash. I know it's really there's not a lot to it, but I'm now just like, how do I do a Nagash on a horse? Because that's a fun army. I really like the Kavalos Death Riders. I think that would be a rad-looking army, and just sling it at people would be fun. Right, might not see. Us at Coastal Wargaming have terrain maps. Oh, Captain Andrew, you should send them to me. I'd like to see that. Yeah, and also, any ideas who will be in AOS V3 starter box against Swordcast Tunnels? No idea. Team Man Cash. Sorry about that. Well, that's me done for the day. If anyone would like, unless anyone's got a question, I appreciate you guys. Let me know how I did. I felt I ummed quite a bit and I got thrown off at the start, so I apologise about that. But I'm hoping to have a bunch of people on who've been playing these lists to talk about them more in the future. It'd be fun to do that, I think, on some of the stream streaks. So I'm trying to organise those. I really, really like Eric and Sean's list. I think they're super fun. I really like Eric's list especially because it's just not got a slan, and it's got one salamander. That's fine. It was great. Helpful to know what little meta there is. Okay, good. Oh, thanks. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Skeleton Stonehorn. Yes, that's a great idea. JP, big love to you. It's like you're in my natural habitat. Yeah, this is my thing. I like analysis. I'm going to do this a bit more. Because I've been organising some stuff thanks to the stats crew for Super Series. So I've started to get my brain's now in the process of how am I going to start reviewing lists for the Super Series? How am I going to get into that? And then with just a swath of information, or like a small amount of information that came in this weekend from an event, I'm quite excited to see it in practice and break it down and look at it, see how those armies work, put them into practice. I would have loved, because the Stormcast list I talked about from Big Sean played against Sean Tubbs, and I'd love to have seen that match. The KO list that won. I'd pay money. I'd pay money to have watched that game, because I imagine he null deployed the Raptors, waited for the double, dropped them. I don't know. Anyway, I'll try and get as much of this stuff put into the show notes as I can. But yeah, you guys are great. Thanks for joining me. Join me again tomorrow. You could join me, Nathan, Dan, James later tonight talking Age of Sigmar. Sorry, any chance you could cover more beginner stuff on some stream streaks, like how to navigate the meta with armies when building lists, etc.? Yeah, sure. Sure. Newbie show. Easy peasy. Easy peasy. Depends on your favorite type of gun, pragmatic. Anyway, thanks for subscribing to the Honest Wargamer. Do all that. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Stay hydrated. Thank you for joining the Honest Wargamer Patreon. Couldn't do it without you. And of course, thank you for joining me live. You guys are great. Have a nice day. Bye.